Welcome everyone to episode 99 of Raw Sport. My name is Ahmed Al-Houli and we are back with another banger of an episode. You heard that right, gents, ladies and gentlemen. Episode 99, we're almost, the next one's going to be a very, very big one. But today we have a huge guest, Mr. AFeldmanMMA, the man who's known internationally, globally as Mr. A. Feldman. Welcome to the show, buddy. What's going on?
Thank you for having me on. Not too much, getting ready for a big weekend of combat sports, and excited to talk to you about what we've kind of seen over the past couple of months and going into finishing at 2025 and even into 2026.
Now, you have spent a ton of time in the world of combat sports, specifically MMA. You cover both sides of the fence, really. Boxing versus MMA. Who's innovating faster at the moment? Who's capturing culture? Who's becoming an integral part of pop community?
It's a tough question to answer in the sense that I believe that the UFC, so not MMA as a whole, but the UFC by itself has gotten it down to a science. To me, the best year that the UFC ever had was 2016. I was kind of expecting a year similar to that for this year with the big TV deal coming up, but it's been a little bit different where they can just do whatever shows they want with whatever fighters they want. And they're going to get people watching. They're going to have good viewership numbers. But then there's a whole new wave in boxing, obviously, over the past couple of years from these crossover boxing matches to Turkey, TKO, which obviously will take a little bit of time. But boxing, I have so many, I have two sisters. Neither of them watch combat sports. The amount of times that their friends reach out to me about like a Jake Paul fight compared to Volkanovski versus Lopez, which is a much better fight in my opinion. So boxing is definitely capturing an audience, but it's not maybe the boxers that the top boxers in the world.
Yeah.
They're not reaching out to me about Canelo. It's usually the crossover boxing matches.
Wow. Who needs to put on the best of the best when you got Ari Emanuel up the top? I mean, he's known as a negotiating legend when it comes to TV rights. Let's be real now.
There's a whole TV show that was based on him, which is one of my favorite series. I think one of the best series of all time in Entourage. So yeah, I think no matter what they've built within the UFC, they're going to be guaranteed very large numbers when it comes to this next TV deal. And coming up very soon, so today's the 9th, on the April 15th, is when they'll be able to start to negotiate with other players besides just ESPN, which, I think obviously Amazon, Netflix, they're all going to be in there, which you couldn't say back before we got into ESPN or even the days of when the UFC was on Spike. You could never imagine where it is today.
What's the UFC done right over the years? How have they reached this level?
In my opinion, and the thing that I enjoy the most, it's probably what got me into the sport in the first place, is the ability to get you attached to the fighters. Whether they are the best fighter in the world or not, the ability for, and I credit the fighters as well, not just the UFC on this, but some of these people have the most amazing backstories you'll ever hear in your life. And the UFC has done a very good job of putting that on display. And it's almost impossible not to get some sort of attachment to these people. And whether they're losing or winning, most likely you're going to tune in. But then you have to give credit to guys like Connor, who took the sport to a completely different level at a time that it was probably one of the most pivotal times in the UFC history. So yeah, it's they've done a lot right, but there could be some changes, I think, going forward as well.
And what do you think those changes should be, based off you've been covering the sport now for a very, very long time?
I believe that. So what we've kind of started to see is fighters having to do a little bit of their marketing on their own. Some of these people have YouTube pages with hundreds and hundreds of thousands of subscribers. They're putting all their own content out there, which has allowed the UFC to kind of take a little bit of a back seat when it comes to telling their story. I believe it should be a combination of the two. I think that the UFC, obviously, I know I've heard you say it as well, just they're a marketing machine. I think you need a good combination of those two. The fighters marketing themselves and building their own platform, along with the UFC powerhouse helping them as well. And not just picking a few random guys that really stand out, but I think there's some other guys and girls that if they were to tell their story a little bit more, people would be all over it.
And why do you think they moved away from that a bit?
I think they've moved away from it because they don't necessarily need to do it. Okay. They're on, for me in the United States, if my TV's on, now most of the time I do put on like YouTube and I'll have MMA videos going. But growing up, and even most households, you just leave ESPN on the TV almost at all times, which has kind of fallen off a little bit, but still you get people who may never have even watched UFC or like MMA as a whole, who are simply tuning in because you're able to also advertise on the ESPN games that they have, such as like the NBA plays on ESPN, hockey, NHL, and oftentimes you'll see the ads for whatever fight night's coming up or whatever pay-per-view card is coming up as well, which, yeah, they weren't able to always do. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've definitely they've become a staple of culture, sporting culture in the US and even around the world now, because as you can see, wherever they go, they fill out stadiums and they get the best gates and so on. Yeah. What I think personally is not spoken enough about is, you mentioned that the fighters have these YouTube channels and social media followings with hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of subscribers. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's spoken about enough. I mean, that's the impact that the UFC has on fighters.
Yeah,
boxing doesn't do that. That's non-existent in boxing, really. So, is that an added value that people underestimate?
So, in my opinion, and this is from the outside, I think that MMA as a whole and the fighters within have kind of realized that you can only make so much in the world of MMA. Obviously, there are outliers, but you need to have some other sort of income. Mm-hmm. And in the day and age that we're in, people like these daily vlogs or weekly vlogs, or whether they're an athlete or not, people just, my generation, even I have some younger cousins that watch all these different streamers doing daily vlogs, exactly what they're doing every day, which 10 years ago wasn't really a thing. And yeah, I think that they've realized that they need to adapt. It's a good way to bring in more money for themselves. They can sell merch on top of it as well. And I think that you don't see it as much in boxing simply because if you look at the fighter pay, they may not need to do it as much when you're talking about the top guys. But I think no matter what, and I've seen some guys start to do it, but I think that no matter what, you want to build your brand. You're in the business of trying to have the largest brand possible heading into a fight.
Absolutely. And yeah, that's one of the in today's world, what people do are really look. If you look at some of the streamers in today's world, they're capturing countries literally. The iShow Speed's been taken on international tours and getting insights into governments and whatnot. And really, if we look back, the pioneer of all this is not far from where you are in New York. His name is Gary Vaynerchuk. In 2016, he had a camera crew following him absolutely everywhere, and that was part of his rise to the actual top. I used to follow him a lot back then, and really he's come into the sports world as well under Vayner Sports, and that's translated. It's translated its way through into these different sporting leagues, and we're starting to see that a lot more now, even with the NFL as well.
Yeah. And you've seen, obviously, Vayner Sports has brought in, I know they represented like Chris Weidman. They have a couple of other guys as well.
One of their guys fought last week. I think, was it Plummet? Not Plummet. What I can't remember his name. But yeah, they're heavily involved now in MMA and other sports. But yeah, that's what I believe personally. Outside the monetary benefit that they get from fighting, they get as athletes. And I think with boxing, yes, the top guys get paid very well, but the middle to bottom don't get paid well at all. Now, if you're not getting paid well at all and you're not getting your brand built, now that's trouble, which leads me into the next part of our conversation is this new TKO boxing league run by Dana White and co. And one of the questions is, some salaries have been put out there. They're too low. Nobody's going to fight for them, blah, blah, blah. But hang on a second. Are we forgetting something here? I'm a young guy contender coming up in the ranks. And yeah, I'll make 75 grand or 15,000 or 10,000 or whatever it is. But hello, I'm going to be put through a marketing machine that's going to build my profile, that's going to actually make me more notable than those that are probably getting paid more than me, and going to allow me to seek alternative revenue channels.
Yeah. That's what they're going to be able to do. That's going to be, I imagine, part of their selling point. Whether the pay is there or not, and it very well may be. As you said, the lower and middle tier boxers don't get paid like the top, say, 5% or even less. But yeah, you're going to perhaps the greatest marketing team within all of sports, in my opinion. And that's probably the best way to build your brand, is to partner with someone like that. But there's also some cons to it as well. So it'll be interesting to see how it does all play out.
What are the cons? To take us from your personal opinion.
Yeah, I think I've always just been very fighter first. Obviously, I love the UFC. I think that what Dana, the Fertittas, what they've all, Ari Emanuel, what they've actually been able to build it's almost unreal. It's movie-like
it really is.
Stuff. But even I saw yesterday them talking about requesting to make some amendments to the Muhammad Ali Act.
Yeah. We can talk about that more, actually. Yeah.
To me, that's a scary thing if you're a boxer. Honestly, I think fighters need to be a little bit more not all, but a large group need to be a little bit more alert on what is really going on, in the sense that if they are to make some changes to the Ali Act for boxers, it will be a massive change for the entire sport. And it'll be very good for the stakeholders and TKO. But ultimately, in the long run, it's not the best for the fighters, that's for sure. Whether they maybe don't see it this second, but 10, 20 years down the line, it definitely is not the most ideal situation. As you see with a lot of these UFC fighters who pretty much built this sport. Not really this most recent generation that is retired, like the Robbie Lawlers and them, but the ones before that who you see a lot of them have fallen on different types of hard times. And it's tough to see when these people do what very small percent of people are able to actually do in this world, to step into a cage or a boxing ring and fight another human in front of millions of people.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably referring to the Chuck Liddells of the world and so on.
Yeah.
They look. I mean, what you're saying is I totally agree with. This can become a very slippery slope, but they didn't hide it. They said it. They're coming in, guns blazing. They're going to break the sport and rebuild it. They said it everywhere. And there's no better time to change a legislation, or a ruling or an act or anything to do with government than when one of your closest friends is the president of the free world.
For real.
But anyway, look, that's what free markets are for, I guess. But in saying that, maybe this might push for that fighters union that people have been pushing for a long time, and people have dropped off, and people haven't really been committed to, if we're going to be honest. And yeah, I mean, you would know a ton about that. I mean, we like in boxing, the unions are pretty much non-existent on any end, from the promoters down. That's why it's been a free-for-all, and that's why somebody like Turkey and Dana can come in and do as they like, because it's the wild, wild west, right? But could we see that now change, starting with the UFC side? I think the fighters are a bit more organized, and then come across to boxing once everybody realizes, hang on a second, we're all going to be impacted by this in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and I think that there's been a couple of times now that you would think maybe, could be the wake-up call that gets fighters to form a union. But ultimately, and this is again from the outside, but it's such an individualistic sport that to get, I don't know the exact number of fighters that the UFC has on their roster, above 600.
600 something, yeah.
Yeah, to get all of them to join together is difficult, especially when some of these top guys and top girls are completely fine with how everything's going. And you see there's a large percent of the fighters in the UFC who will never say a bad word about them. Obviously, it is their
buddies. They're buddies with the top, yeah. Makes sense.
And it's as if it's their employer, although they are independent contractors. Not many act as independent contractors. So it would be great if maybe this would be a wake-up call, but honestly, I'm not sure that we see it anytime soon.
You're not holding your hopes too high, eh?
I feel as if since I got into the sport, it's been talked about, and there's been efforts, but none of the efforts ever really made leeway.
It's almost happening at the college sporting level. It's
Yeah.
almost it's almost there. It's almost there pretty much, whether athletes become pretty much employees, because there's no hiding from it. It's a big business. It's
Yeah.
multi-billion-dollar business. It's
You'll
funny
see it
that,
there
yeah,
first, for sure.
yeah. Well, there you go. But the funny thing is, every single league in the world, every single sport, right? And probably I think I'm talking a bit too much, but just excuse me here. It's
No.
the every single league has a players association, right?
Yep.
Except combat sports.
Mhm.
Why? It just doesn't make any sense. And they're just checks and balances, really. That's all it is. It's we love what Dana's doing. We love what TKO is doing. We have nothing against them, because without their investment, this would not happen either. But we're saying, in terms of the integrity of the sport, there's always got to be checks and balances. But it doesn't exist in any fight world. In the fight
Yeah.
world, it doesn't exist. I wonder why. It's just mind-boggling.
Yeah. It is really mind-boggling, and you see a lot of these newer MMA promotions come out, the PFL, the GFL. They're all about marketing as fighter first.
Yeah,
That's their. If you're competing with the UFC, you're going to need a strong sales pitch to bring guys over there, and you're going to need a lot of money. Um, Even by just saying, though, you're fighter first, I still haven't seen anything
yeah,
that
actions.
really shows it. Yeah. So, yeah, it is kind of crazy that every other sport has these unions that protect these athletes to the nth degree. But to me, the most dangerous and the riskiest two sports do not have a union. Um,
Yeah.
Obviously, the Muhammad Ali Act protects boxers much more than anything that we have in MMA, but um, yeah.
The problem with the Muhammad Ali Act is, Senator McCain, I believe, was the one who introduced it. Then what happened was, it just got put on a shelf. It never evolved.
Mm-hmm.
So boxing as a sport didn't follow up, didn't lobby, didn't push to make that act evolve and become an integral, deeper part of the sport. And I think it just speaks volumes, honestly, of the state of the sport. And that was one of the issues with the act. And that's why, we're going to see it now change. It's almost certain that it is going to change. But
Yeah.
if we look at the PFL and we look at this new league, the GFL, it's called the GFL, right? The one that's got the countries
Yeah.
and so on and so on. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
How do these guys fit in the picture? I mean, I've never seen a PFL stadium full, and they're churning over a lot of money. And I follow Don Davis, he's one of the
Yeah.
founders and commissioners of the sport, alongside with the kickboxing world champion. I can't remember his name. Um, the guy who's from my part of the world originally. Oh, geez. Anyway, um, so these guys are playing a role in the sport, where PFL has their TV rights with ESPN. They're showing their combat. GFL is
Yeah.
coming in now and reckon they're going to change everything, and it's going to. But all they've done is they've recycled old fighters that used to fight in the UFC and used to fight here and used to fight there, and they're giving them fights, which to me goes back to the conversation of fighter integrity, protecting the fighter, and most of those fighters should not be fighting. What
For
are
sure.
your thoughts of these two leagues? What role are they really playing here?
Yeah, it's interesting because, as you said, the PFL does have their TV rights are with ESPN,
Mm-hmm.
which we spoke about earlier, as that is the biggest platform, or one of the biggest platforms you could have here in the US. Um, they're also in negotiations, and we'll see where they end up. But GFL on the other side has no broadcasting deal yet, even though they are about to put on their first event. I think it's in May. But what they play, so I think the PFL is right now on obviously a different level than the GFL. I think that they have some very talented fighters. But, and I don't mean this in a rude way, but I think that you have people who are very successful business minds at the top of the PFL. That doesn't always completely translate into the world of combat sports. Dana got into the UFC as a passion project. Mm-hmm. Don Davis has been a very successful business person outside of the sports industry. And to me, the biggest thing is the storytelling. There's some of these guys who are in the PFL. There was one on Ariel Helwani's show yesterday. His name's Thad Jean. And quite frankly, I didn't know almost anything about him. I saw that he fought this week, and he had a funny call out after the fight. Talented kid in his 20s. Had a cool story, but it just like has a charisma. This is a kid who grew up watching Conor McGregor, and he brought that up in the interview. And I would love to see those stories be told better. I think that their marketing, I actually spoke with someone within their team after the Paul Hughes versus Usman Nurmagomedov fight. And I said, that was the best fight the PFL has ever had. But now we have a 2-month break until your next event. 2 months in the world of combat sports. We'll forget. I think I put out a graphic maybe a couple of weeks ago that showed that I think that the UFC was having 13 events in 2025 before the PFL had their second.
Jeez.
So, yeah,
crazy.
It's,
and you're saying that was a great opportunity for them to actually maximize the exposure, and they didn't. I heard about it because I'm a fight fan. They could have reinvigorated that rivalry between Ireland and Dagestan that started with Conor McGregor and Khabib, who was in the corner with his cousin. So it's so many opportunities missed, and I think it's because, and this is a problem as well with some of the boxing promotions that we're seeing now, is that they don't have fight people in there, people that understand the sport enough, not enough of them on the ground to sort of lay this out and plan ahead, and then bring in the marketing executives and say, hey, these two, bang, they clash. We have an opportunity to really sell this. But I mean, hopefully they will evolve. But as you said, an event every 2 months in the world of combat sports just doesn't cut it.
Yeah, and then after the 2 months, right now they're in their tournament style where they had 2 events last weekend, I believe 2 events this weekend, 2 the following weekend. So it's kind of like a little bit of an overload. But for avid fight fans, it's great to see, but then you get that break again. But ultimately, GFL, PFL, the tournament style of combat sports does not work. The most important thing is marketing these guys, the storytelling. And if you aren't able to do that because you're getting certain matchups, for example, that guy, Thad Jean, who I was talking about, his next fight is actually against the former Bellator champion, a very big step up in competition. If he was in the UFC, or even if the PFL just did their own matchmaking, they're not putting him up against Jason Jackson in this next fight. If he wins, obviously there's a lot of pros to it, but if he loses, granted, he's losing to a very high-leveled, highly skilled fighter, but he has an undefeated record. He's got charisma. Is there really a reason to rush him through and take that next step? I would say no, but I think the tournaments, when you're just forced into different matchups, it kind of takes away the marketing and the storytelling that makes this sport so good.
Yeah, I think that, like, in my opinion, they've spent too much or too many resources in acquiring fighters and not enough in building those fighters and telling their stories and having those regular shows, because there's plenty of talent out there. We see when we have the Dana White Contender Series every week for like 8 weeks. What is it? From all over the
Yeah, I think
world.
it's 8, 10. Yep.
Yeah. And now that's a multi-million-dollar TV rights deal as well on its own. So
Yeah.
there's definitely a market there if the brands are built right. Which takes me into the next part of our show where we talk where one of the conversations across the board in the world of combat sports, and we see this a lot, is the crossover between sports uh, and influencers fighting in boxing, and then MMA guys coming to boxing and having the big fights, and then there's this perception boxers make more money. Look at the MMA guys going to boxing. Hang on a second. And I'm only being a devil's advocate here, of course.
Yeah.
This MMA guy who's coming to fight this well-known boxer, why is he making more money in the first place? Is he the average Joe Blow, or is he the top of the sport? Who he spent 10 years his profile being built under this UFC marketing machine, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that it's easily forgotten, and I'm all for the fighter always, because I believe they put their life on the line. But we also have to balance things out here. And I think it's a really common misconception where people think that just because they come from UFC to boxing, and boxing has so much more money in that fight, that the UFC model is broken, it's flawed, they don't get paid enough, blah blah blah. But what's enabled him to get to this level?
Yeah.
So that's the conversation that we're seeing through the crossover between this code and that code. What are your thoughts when they come across and they find other codes?
Yeah, and I definitely agree with what you're saying there, because without what they were able to do under the UFC banner, and whether it's from their own marketing or from obviously the marketing of the powerhouse of the UFC, that's where they built their brand. So when they are coming over to boxing, it's tough to like try to equate the fighter pay. It makes things kind of a little bit blurry when you're doing the fighter pay from on the crossover boxing matches, because also it seems as if most of them have come against Jake Paul. And you're talking about a guy who has built a massive platform. So there is a little bit more money to go around. Obviously, for me as an MMA guy, it's tough to watch some of these guys who Anderson Silva was my favorite fighter of all time. To see him go over and lose to Jake Paul, it hurts a little bit for sure. But yeah, it's kind of built I almost kind of separate all three. Like you have MMA, you have boxing, and then you have the crossover world that is in its own sector to some degree.
Yeah, let's talk a bit about Jake Paul. Right, Jake Paul is this influencer YouTuber who's come across, spending millions of dollars on his training team for multiple years now, and really built himself into a bit of an athlete. Like, let's be real, right? We got to speak it the way it is, and that's what we do here at Raw Sport. And this guy's actually becoming an athlete, and the call outs are happening. He literally in that last negotiation with Canelo and Turkey Sheikh, he was a key player in Canelo getting what he wanted.
Yeah.
Right?
It's
now,
crazy.
Before that, if you doubted him, no problem. No worries. But when he's pretty much determining where, like, at the end of the day, is a key power broker in the negotiation of the biggest fighter in the sport. Come on, I mean, there's something there. We have to start respecting this guy. And then on top of that, yesterday they've announced a ton of women's fighters signings. they're pretty much becoming the platform for women's boxing.
Yeah.
And we saw on his undercard on Netflix when he fought Mike Tyson, he put women's boxing on the map in that fight right there.
Yep.
And again, from my perspective, this is just purely mutual, down the middle. That fight there is the beginning of the rise of women's boxing.
Yeah.
Like when the great Ronda came through the UFC and she built a platform and she broke the norms. Amanda Serrano is doing that right now under the stewardship and guidance of Jake Paul and Nikita Badarin. So how can we not respect this guy?
100%. Right now, right across 15 minutes from me, you had, I guess it probably is over by now, but you have the Katie Taylor, Amanda Serrano press conference going on. And it's a all female fight card. I know boxing, MMA, some of the biggest stars have been women, as you said, Ronda Rousey, Amanda Nunes, Miesha Tate was a massive star, Holly Holm. They've done a very good job at, even in the PFL right now, there's a woman named Dakota Ditcheva who's a superstar in the making. You haven't seen that as much on the boxing side, but that day after Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul, I received more messages from some of the most random people, my mom, her friends, all saying that Amanda Serrano got robbed. I don't know if they've ever watched a fight in their lives, or maybe not in years. So, yeah, you definitely have to respect. Jake didn't have to do that. I don't know exactly what the storyline to really go for that from the beginning. I don't know what caused that, but credit to him because it's definitely helped the sport of boxing, a lot of it, especially obviously females in the sport.
Absolutely. And I think Netflix is the perfect platform for it.
Yep.
Because who watches Netflix? Families, wives, husbands always working.
Yeah.
even the husbands, when they come home at night, they'll sit down and watch Netflix. That's how it is. That's literally how things are. And good on him. Power to him. He's done well. He's come through and he's making a difference. Good on him.
Yeah, for
All
sure.
Right, something that
talk about one last thing there. If you're going to talk about the UFC being a marketing machine, Netflix has to be right up there with them.
Oh wow, yeah.
They are a beast when it comes to marketing these random shows that I find myself watching. So they have something there as well.
With subtitles, don't forget that. We used to complain about subtitles. Now we watch full series documentaries with subtitles. So it's crazy.
We love them.
Absolutely. So let's look at the landscape now with this next media right deal with the UFC, right? You have Amazon's coming officially into the fight world. Their stress test was Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul. Then they did the NFL. That was their stress test. Amazon Prime has an NFL active NFL deal, which is Thursday night football, and that as well, they've done their stress testing and so on and so on. These organizations are becoming the powerhouse media outlets of the world. And we have seen players like ESPN remove Top Rank, remove the MLB, cutting all the fat that doesn't really give them back, or not what they expect, basically. That was some of those complaints.
Yeah.
Do you think we will see Amazon Prime and Netflix at the negotiating table come the 15th of April?
I think 100%. I had a graphic that I was just trying to pull up that just showed the amount of people that are signed up for Netflix versus a ESPN Plus.
Yeah, it's crazy.
There's a monumental difference, and the only one who can compete with that is Amazon Prime. And as someone who does watch almost every NFL game. Amazon has done a great job. At first, I was a little bit hesitant, just like I was hesitant with Netflix getting into live sports. It's a totally different ball game. But Amazon has done very well with it. Netflix had its troubles for the Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul fight, but I think that was bound to happen. Yeah, they still had insane numbers.
Yeah.
So I think that there's no doubt that those two are waiting for the 15th. And I imagine seeds have already been planted. And I would be very surprised if one of them don't get at least part of the UFC broadcast rights.
Part of the cake, yeah. You can't mention Amazon Prime and not mention Reacher. I mean,
yeah,
hand in hand. One thing that people don't really understand about Amazon and Prime is that Amazon's power is e-commerce and data, really, on the back end, and all this collective and aggregation of data enables them to sell more and learn more about potential clients, customers, and engage those customers, because they have over 200 million members on Amazon Prime. So any content they bring in, it's literally them monetizing their audience. So it's like they can cross-promote, cross-sell e-commerce products all the way through. And what a better time. There's no better time to do that than when people are paying for a pay-per-view on that platform. You know these guys spend.
Yeah.
If they're spending as a passion sport, they're going to spend, because no other sport has that. No other sport has people buying pay-per-views to watch the biggest fights or the biggest game. Everything else is free on the TV networks or behind one paper wall. Not two, like fight fans. So fight fans are known to spend money. So these platforms know that, especially Amazon Prime.
It's there just to be a fight fan. I think in 2025, if you're to buy every pay-per-view and have a subscription to ESPN Plus, I think you're spending, it was something around like $1,300 on the year.
Wow.
There's no other sport that comes close to that. Part of me hopes that, and I think this is wishful thinking to some degree, but part of me hopes that if they were to go with the Netflix, or if they were to go with Amazon Prime, the pay-per-view wouldn't be $89.99. But they already know people are willing to pay it. So who knows? That'll be another interesting part if they do end up on one of those. Will their pay-per-views be potentially just free? Not free, but with the subscription. I think pretty unlikely, but I've seen some people toss that around. And in my mind, there's very little chance of that. But yeah, it costs a lot to be a fight fan. And we're the exact market an Amazon would want, that's for sure.
Imagine this new TKO boxing league on Netflix or Amazon. Wow.
Yeah. The fact that they're going to have just this packaged group of combat sports is going to be, it's just more attractive to these networks as well, these streaming services. I'm very interested to see what the ESPN is able to offer and what they're willing to offer.
Well, I believe Kevin Iole said TKO have been offered $1 billion a year, or they're going to be offered $1 billion a year for 7 years. And I was pretty sure he was referring to the UFC deal, not the boxing deal. People thought he was talking about boxing. It was more, I think, to the UFC deal. And that's crazy money. That's NFL money.
Yeah, because their previous offer or their previous deal, I don't know the exact amount of years now, but it was a $1.5 billion deal with ESPN that's ending at the end of 2025. So $1 billion a year it's crazy. But what they did during COVID from 2020 to now,
They gave
I guess
ESPN.
it makes sense.
They gave ESPN content when nobody else was giving them content. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
And
many new fans too.
yeah, 100%. And if you look at when they reach this level of TV rights, still it ends up being cut up into a few different packages because TKO is already dealing with WWE on Netflix and they're also on Peacock and all these other platforms. And I think we might see that with UFC. I think so, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I imagine the same on that. I think it gets a little tricky with some of, like, is ESPN going to get Dana White's Contender Series?
Yeah.
But then not the. But yeah, I imagine they will split it up.
All right. Fighter marketing, and fan engagement. What do you think are the most important, let's say, top 3 principles when it comes to fighter marketing and fighters really building their profile?
I think the number one thing, which has been a little bit lost, is authenticity. I think a lot of people think they see some of these characters who have had success and think they're maybe playing a role. But a lot of what Conor did was actually his authentic self. If you look at his interviews in 2012, before he was even in the UFC, he had that same charisma. Versus someone like Colby Covington that plays a shtick, it's a little bit tougher to get attached to. Some people like it though. And then I think number 2 is, like we kind of already spoke about, is just being open to building your brand, not relying specifically on the promoter to do everything. You got to grind. If you're fighting 3 times a year, obviously it's tough on the body. It's tough on the brain, the mental side of things as well. But the investment to build a marketing team around you, and just like whether it's on YouTube or merchandise, I think that's huge. Especially now, I think merch is one of the most important things. And some of these guys do such a good job with it, like Sean O'Malley, Max Holloway. The amount of things that I've bought from their sites because they're doing these drop style new shirts for every time they fight. These people have an opportunity to come out with new stuff and get reoccurring purchasers pretty much every time that they fight. And that's very different than the NFL, where I buy my Giants jersey as a Giants fan. I can keep that Giants jersey for as long as I need. There's no real customization to it season by season, but fight by fight, I think that these guys are able to build new merch, build new marketing, build new videos around them. So just an openness to putting a team around you and investing in yourself. And then the last is skills. You have to be good enough. You don't need to be I don't believe you have to be the best fighter in the world to be the most marketable, but you need to get some wins. I think that style of fight is also somewhat important as well nowadays, because you do have a little bit more of a casual fan base that maybe want to see a certain type of stand and bang style. But I think that those are the big 3.
Wow, and you know what? Perfect example of that last one is Chandler. Michael Chandler is. I mean, how many wins has he had in the UFC?
2,
one,
and
one or 2, or whatever it is.
Yeah. Tony Ferguson and Dan Hooker that one was impressive. Ferguson was on a losing streak, and but he's exciting.
Very exciting. Which brings us to our last part, combat sports 2025 and beyond. What are your predictions, my man? Pitfalls, power plays?
Yeah, I think that My one prediction for TKO. So I bought a Zuffa boxing shirt. This was back in, had to be around 2015, maybe 2016. And that shirt has sat in my closet for almost 10 years now. Nothing ever really came from it. Yeah, the Mayweather McGregor, and that's really it. I think that it takes a decent amount of time for TKO to really get off the ground, TKO boxing to get off the ground running. I know Dana had already hinted at it's going to be a little bit of time because Turkey has other things. But I think that's more, TKO will make some serious moves, and we're looking at around 2027. And that's just my opinion. I think it takes a little bit of time. And then the other big one is kind of what we spoke about. I think that the UFC is going to land with a Netflix or Amazon. And it's going to take the sport to even a different level. A level that plenty of people probably never saw coming. If you go back just even 15 years when they signed with Fox. So yeah, I think those are the two biggest. And one hopeful thing, I'm hopeful that there's some sort of competition with the UFC. Whether it's the PFL really starts to either get lucky with some of these super marketable athletes, or if they start to really just put a lot of attention into marketing these people's stories. Because I just think that these fighters deserve to have more than one option. I've talked to a lot of fighters and they say that they just only want to be with the UFC. I think it's important to be able to want to go multiple places. So yeah, that's a big one. And then boxing, the biggest storyline on my end, just as a little bit more of a casual fan on the boxing side, would be the TKO stories. So
Absolutely. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. You've heard it from the man himself, Mr. Feldman. Thank you very much. You've been very, very generous with your time. Take care, everyone. Any last words for us, Mr. Feldman?
No, I appreciate you having me on. It was a good conversation, and hope everyone enjoys the upcoming fights this weekend.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Mr. Feldman. Thank you all for tuning in. Take